Here is my Bush record player. It's my actual one from when I was living with my parents way back in the 60s. They bought it for me and my sister to play our records on, and it's been in their loft for about 30 years, so I got it out and it's still in one piece almost. It's a Bush valve one, an SRP31D, the last of the valve ones before they went to transistor. It's pretty dirty on the outside, but and there's a bit of trim missing. Still got the original Bush logo, and inside it's still got the original booklet it came with, and it says in loft 45 Napier Road. Well, that's where I was brought up. I lived there till I was about 19. Now I was about 15 when the Beatles started, and I started buying records in 1963. In fact, I've still got a lot of my records. Some disappeared and some have been stolen over the years, but here's a couple here, including this original Beatles single, From Me to You, 1963, Hippie Hippie Shake, Brian Paul and the Tremolos, and the Rolling Stones, I Want to Be Your Man, 1963. And some later ones, 1965, Ready Steady Who, there's an old Elvis Presley one, and Johnny Kidd and the Pirates. I've got loads and loads more records. They're all my original ones I bought when I was a teenager. But looking in here, it says I lived in Dover, Kent, England, and there's the place Golden and Wind, Cannon Street, Dover. But that's the place I also bought my very first guitar, which I still have. It was an acoustic. I lived in Dover, and this booklet actually says it was bought in 9th of January 1965. Well, I'm sure I was playing records the previous year in 64, but I can't remember what it was played on. Maybe I didn't play any records, maybe I just listened on the radio. Anyway, so that's the record player me and my sister used, but the turntable mat has atrophied and has just broken up, and the pickup cartridge in the head, the red one there, is the needle's not fitting properly, but this moves quite neatly. Needs cleaning up, obviously, and the valve circuit's a valve amp, and it's more powerful than the 31C, which went before it. Although the 31C looks very similar, but has a Garrard deck. This has got a Monarch deck. This has got more powerful valves. It's got an ECL 86s, which are like the modern EL 84s. They give, and it's push-pull. That's quite a lot of power. The previous ones were ECL 83s in the 31C model, and they weren't as powerful. So this is pretty powerful. It's got a decent speaker in there, and it's got a German Grundig tweeter in. So, but it's going to need servicing. So I wonder what to do. So I look on eBay, and there's quite a lot of these on eBay, all different states of repair. So I bought another one on eBay down here, pretty cheap. It's got no logo, and it does have the turntable mat. In fact, I cleaned this turntable mat. That's like why it looks so clean. In fact, I cleaned the whole case with some vinyl cleaner, and I'm going to service both of these. This comes out quite easy. You take the E-clip off. And I'm going to service the valve circuits because the selenium rectifiers, they got to be changed, and probably a few other components. I check all the valves, and the advantage of this one, of course, is I can plug in an extension from the other one into the back there, and then this would be stereo channel, because these are mono, just not in mono, although you can get the stereo needle, but the stereo left and right channel. The left channel feeds back into the amp through there, so to make both channels through it. So I can connect them up and get stereo. These were actually made also as separate speaker units, but I've never ever seen one for sale, ever. The valve ones. I've seen plenty of transistor ones, which look very similar, but they're no good for these because the input resistance is much too low, and the signal from these into them wouldn't sound right, and they also look slightly different. So I'm going to repair both of these, service them, and connect them up in stereo, and see what they sound like, because I know they do actually sound pretty good. I'm going to clean this one up, and I might be able to get another turntable mat as well, or I'll make one. Still got the original old plugs, Bakelite with no shields on them, and I do remember buying this. Had an arm with a little duster on the end for cleaning the record. Well, I've still got that stuck on, but the arm's disappeared. So I'll be showing you how I take it apart for the technically minded people, how to take it apart, how to service it, what I've got to fix, checking the components and everything, and that'll be in the next part of the video. Okay, this is the first part of how to service the Bush SRP31D. First we'll look at the turntable. To take the turntable off is pretty straightforward. It's got a big C-clip which you just pop off with a little screwdriver, and then you can lift the platter out. It's not that heavy. It's got a nice tight fit. It's got a sintered bearing in the middle, and you can take that off and you set it aside. Don't lose the clip. Inside you've got the exposed rubber idler wheel here. That's quite nice rubbery. It's still quite bendy, so hopefully that's going to be alright. There's some grease on some of these parts. There's wheel. You can check all those parts. Now you can take the whole deck out quite easily. This big screw here, one and one the other side, are for transportation. You do them up tight and it locks it to the wooden base. Now the wooden base is held into the cabinet by 4 self-tapping screws. There's 2 at the back and 2 at the front here, which I've already undone. And then you can use this big screw to lift it, and you just ease it up. Just, it seems to stick on that screw head just there. Just get it past there, and then you can lift it and rest it inside. You can see all the underside. You can see the grease, and you've got the pickup wires coming in here to a tag board, and then they run off to the connections on the back, well down there, and one goes off to the inside to the amp, and you've got a little mains cable here. There's a little sticker on there telling you the mains, black and brown. Inside there's a bit of paper laying in the bottom which just says it's 230 volts, 50 cycles, made in Great Britain. It's got a number, PS634, and then P25, whatever that means. And in the bottom of the case, you can't see it down there, there's another tiny little sticker that says 1103, whatever that means. And then there's another bit of tape, and green sticky stuff has fallen off of somewhere. It's the same as the green tape wrapped around these wires here, so it must have been stuck on somewhere for some reason. H103 is written on there, which is the number inside. It says 1103, so I don't know if there's any significant in that number. There's a little 234 written on there. Can't see any date codes anywhere though, not at the moment. Anyway, but we know this was bought January 65, so it's got to be made in 64. So that's how you get the record deck out to service. Very straightforward. Now to do the actual amp, there's a little grill in the back here, which with a little plate which says to change the voltage, remove this grill. It's held on by 3 screws. If you take it off, there's a little plug thing on the back of the mains transformer for changing the voltage, but I don't think anyone ever changed that ever. And there's 2 little sockets, you can't see them there, for tape out, which is little banana type sockets. Anyway, to get this plate here, I'll show you in a minute, I'll turn it over, is held on by 2 screws. 2 nice brass, specially made screws, and you undo them and that plate falls off the bottom. In fact, it's the plate with this strip. It seems to fall off of all these Bush things. The glue has kind of swollen behind it and pushed it out, and even this one's got a split round the light, and the other one I've got it's split and it's exactly the same place, so it's obviously some sort of glue problem that happened over the years. Anyway, that's a heavy piece of plastic, so I'll just move this on its back so we can see inside. Okay, I've just put it on its back so you can see what's happening here. As I said, I've removed the plate from the front, which is held on by 2 screws there. There should have been another screw in the middle, but that's missing. Pull it off and you can see the controls here, treble, bass and the on-off switch and the volume. Now you can see some components inside, but you still can't get to them, so you might wonder how to get to them. Well, it's quite easy. This front panel is held by 2 clips, and you just ease it down. Just pull it downwards, and it will come out off the clips. There are the clips there, and there's the inside. You've got a Celestion speaker and a Grundig tweeter. You've got the transformer for the speakers here with some components on them, and inside here you've got the 2 ECL86 valves. Now they are a triode and a pentode in each one, and the two pentodes like EL84, they almost exactly the same specification. Work in push-pull, and there's a triode in each. One is a phase splitter, and the other one can be used as the input gain, and they're like ECC83 specifications. They're very nice valves. They do all the work that you need. Doesn't need a lot of gain in this amp because the ceramic pickups are very high output. They didn't need a lot of gain, so I only needed 1 gain stage, and it's very neat. You've got a mains transformer in the middle, and you've got a number of components still underneath. Now to get them out, this chassis is held on by some nuts inside, and I'm going to have to undo them, and then I'll show you the rest of the video. And these valves, I can take them out and test them on the valve tester. Just pop the 2 valves out for you to look at. They're the original Mallard ECL86s. They're super nice. Hopefully they test fine. They don't work very hard in these record players, not like in a guitar amp or something, so hopefully they're not worked at very high voltage either, so hopefully they're going to test good. Got a bit of dust on them. Put them safely to one side, and just before I take this out, you've got a bulb here which lights up the red light on off, and there's another bulb here which is got a writing on it, says fuse 6 volt 0.5 amp. They use a bulb as a fuse, and that's also limits the inrush current when you turn it on, so it's got a double function, so it's very nice. Bulbs were made very well in the 50s and 60s. They used to last forever, not like bulbs these days. And in fact, most equipment I've seen from the 50s and 60s still have the original bulbs in them. So I expect them to actually be okay. Anyway, I'm going to take the chassis out now. Right, to remove the chassis, there are 4 screws. They're 4BA, and luckily I've got a 4BA nut driver. If you haven't, then you'll probably have to use some pliers or something. And they came out with, there's a washer behind each one, there's 4 of them. So I've undone them, and also just over here there's a little earth strap, which straps this to the grill on the back, just for safety I suppose, because the transformer's got some taps just there, just behind the grill. I suppose if it came loose and touched, it's for safety. Anyway, now this is loose, so it can be raised up, but the wire here going off to the back of the amp is really preventing you from getting it out like that. So I'm just going to lay it back down again, and so that it can be sort of swiveled out. I've laid the unit back down, and I've had to take the desk up here, the plinth, and rotate it to give me some slack on the wires here, so I can get this out. So I'll just zoom in so you can see a bit closer. Okay, so this can be laid down on the table, the speaker section. Now the amp section here, which is nice and dirty, I took the 4 screws out, so that slides out now, and can be turned over, and the wires here that were holding it now are slack enough so we can look underneath. There's a very big Plessey capacitor here. Now Plessey made excellent capacitors. I've often found that these are still okay, and I'll be able to test them. There's also the typical Plessey yellow and red ones here, which must be on the cathodes of the EL86s for setting the self-bias. I can check them, and although the paper shrivels on these, they are often fine. I'll have a look at some of the other components. I don't find a lot of problems with these resistors and these old capacitors. They're normally fantastically well made. There's a little power resistor there. I'll clean the pots obviously, and I'll try and draw the circuit out. The tweeters, I hear that these tweeters often pack up, so I'll try and look into that as well. Maybe we'll find out when it's powered up what it sounds like. And the other thing is the mains wire is just two wires. Where's it? Here it is. Oh no, it's 3 wires. So it's let's just try and get the 3 wires there. The mains wire comes in, it's red, black, green, which is what all the wires were in the olden days. And the green wire is soldered to a bent up piece of the chassis there, which I'm sure is fine. That's what it should be. Bonded nice there. So it's going to be fairly straightforward. You can just see the tap on the back of the transformer there. Everything looks good. I'll check it all out and let you know if I find there's something not working, and I'll do the same on the other unit as well. Oh, by the way, there's a date on here, July 64. If you can see that, I'll try and turn it a bit. July 64. So they didn't have components hanging around like for ages, so when they got components in and they used them pretty quickly. But anyway, it must have been made after July 64, obviously. And there is the selenium rectifier. They can be replaced by a very modern, very small silicon rectifier these days. It's just half wave. It's probably not worth leaving that in there. I mean, it's the modern ones are so reliable, and these can fail and drop voltage. I'll check it anyway, but I'll have to find a way of putting a little tag board in there just so that I can put the rectifier in. Everything else looks great. I mean, just looking for more date codes. There's lots of codes on the speaker here. It says it's a 3 ohm speaker, but I can't actually see an actual date code. But we know it's made, well, it was bought in January 65, the capacitor 64, so it was made in the second half of 64 anyway. Okay, I'm just going to check this smoothing capacity, this Plessey 50 microfarad. I've got an ESR meter here, and I've just put it on and measured this 1/2, and it says 52.68 microfarads, 0.4 ohms, which is excellent. I don't think we need to change that. I just check the other side, and it says 52.31, 0.41 ohms. So that plastic capacitor is just fine. I'm not going to have to change that at all. Testing the two Mullard ECL 86 valves from the Bush player on this Mark III Avo tester. Now, in my book, the data book, it only went up to ECL 84, so I had to work it out. I did find some data, worked out the settings. There's a triode and a pentode. I've already checked the triode. Now the pentodes, which work in push-pull, they need to be pretty close match to get a good result. So said in the grid voltage you should get 36 milliamps and a GM of 10. So on this one I've already set the parameters and got it on test, and it's giving about 38 milliamps. And if I check the GM, just quickly like this, turn that down to there, just turn that to 0, and switch it to here, set that to 1, and the scale shows on the there almost exactly 10, just over 10. So this Mullard valve is superb. I'll just check the other one, turn the scale these down, just turn the heater off, just pull that one out, put this one in, turn the heater and the test back on here. It just takes a few seconds to warm up. Just watch the scale. Here it comes. So it's coming up. The other one was 38. It had been warming up a little while, so this one's getting there. And well, I can recheck the GM anyway, just down here. Just set this to 0. Just increase the sensitivity. Get that to 0. It will drift as it warms up, but yeah, just a little bit over at 11, though it's still warming up. So well, it's close enough. I think that'll give quite a good push-pull. So good old Mullard valves. They just made them so well. Okay, and I'm just going to check the grounding tweeter just to see if it's working. I believe they should be about 800 picofarads, so I've connected up this LCR meter to it. Just turn it on and see what we get. Uh, 772 picofarads, so that sounds pretty close, so hopefully it's going to be okay. This is a selenium diode here, which is, I don't think it's any good actually, but I'm going to change it anyway, because if anything's ever going to fail, it's going to be that. There was a wire running from the transformer to the selenium diode. I've cut that out and replaced it quite easily by this 1M4007 1 amp diode just off the transformer to the B plus position on this capacitor. It's only half wave rectifier. This tiny little diode replaces that rather large selenium diode, so in 50 years that's one of the developments, and this costs about a penny or less, and I don't know what that cost in those days. Anyway, so that was a very simple mod, just went straight across, put a little bit of heat shrink on it. This is the Bush record player I've got on the desk now, and I've powered it up with a load of meters on it to look at the voltages. I powered it up slowly, checking it with the Variac, which is now set at 240 volts. It's drawing about 0.2 of an amp off the mains, and the B plus, the first voltage of the rectifier, is showing about 257 volts. But I have drawn out the circuit diagram, which I've got here, so I can, if you're interested in circuit diagrams and how things work, I've got a few things to check on the voltage. So the mains transformer here is pretty simple, with a single half-wave rectifier. That was a selenium rectifier, which probably, I think it had gone anyway, but it's replace them there. If anything's going to go, it's going to be that. Use a little modern 1M4007 diode, rated at 1 amps, can take 1000 volts, so they're so cheap. Halfway rectified. Now the two capacitors in the plastic can, they're fine. Drops it through a 3K3 down to the preamp section. You've got the output transformer here. Now some of the voltages are going to check. You've got the two push-pull pentodes, common cathode resistor 120 ohms. That's all pretty normal. They've got a little grid stop of 6.8K in there, which is good for stability. They've got a phase splitter here. It's just 47K each end, and then that feeds to the grid. So got the voltage to check there. Very basic triode section on the front end, 2K2 and 100K. So that should be pretty normal. The input to that grid comes off the 1 meg volume control, and the pickup cartridge, which is a ceramic high output, needs to go into a very high resistance, so at least 1 meg. Comes down here. They put a little 100K in for some reason, and a little 270p high frequency feed forward. There's some very strange feedback on this amp. They must have done it to set the sound how they like it, because the rest of the amp's pretty simple, and I don't know why they went to all that trouble with all this feedback around the bass control and to the front end. The feedback comes down all the way down from the loudspeaker side. Actually the loudspeaker side's got a couple of resistors soldered across there, 120 and 680 they look like. I couldn't quite make them out, but they're low resistance anyway, which cuts the voltage a little bit on the feedback. It's only a 3 ohm speaker. The feedback comes back here. The treble control is just a very basic treble cut, which you see on lots of amps, just cuts the treble down as you move this up and down. The bass is much more weird. It's in the feedback loop, and has a whopping 10 meg resistor connected to the grid there, and the feedback also has got some high frequency all the way back to the front there. Anyway, we checked some voltages, and as I said, the B plus is running about 257. The preamp sage after the dropper is 227 volts. The 27 volts there is on the phase splitter. The 1.4 volts is on the bias on the very first triode, and this one here, 6.66 volts, or fluctuating slightly, is the cathode on the pentodes. So I'll just show you that on the drawing here. The 6.6 is there. It's across a 120 ohms. So doing your VIR equation, 55 milliamps. Now I've got the original ECL 86 specification here, operating in pentode mode. Pentode mode here. Slightly higher voltage, but looking down this pentode section here, it says the cathode should be 55 milliamps, and this is exactly what we're reading max, but that's for two, I assume that's for two valves, so we're running about half. 2 times 37 milliamps it can run at. So it must be 2 times 55 max, so we're running at half. They suggested the cathode resistor somewhere. That's the anode one. I can't see it, must be on another page. Anyway, everything seems to be working fine. There's no sound from the speakers, but I'm assuming that's because there is no hum or noise. By the way, the heaters in this amp, they're not a twisted pair like you find in most amps. The negative is connected to the chassis, and the positive AC, about 6 volts, is just run to the two valves and uses the chassis for a return, but doesn't seem to be causing any problems. The whole chassis is one big earth connection. Anyway, that seems really good. Everything's been working, and I'm going to screw this one back together and see if we can play a record on it. And then the other one I've got, I'm going to do exactly the same with that, and then we can connect them up in stereo. Okay, almost finished, just putting it back together again. The rubber wheel here needed cleaning, so I used some special TIAC rubber cleaner and conditioner with a cotton bud, obviously, and cleaned that right up. And it was slipping, but doesn't slip now. And also, this is a thrust race just here. You can just see the ball. It rests on some little ball bearings. I've put some oil on there, and also put some very thin oil here on the sintered bearing that the desk runs on there, and a little bit of oil on the motor top and bottom bearing there, just a thin oil, and it seems to be working okay. So I'll be playing a record in a minute. Here's the Bush player, just been serviced by me, and it's all back together again. Got a couple of 45s on it, and let's see what it sounds like. Okay, so it works. Just got to service the other one I've got and connect them up in stereo and see how they sound together. Okay, I've serviced both of the machines now, and this is the first one I did. This is the second one. This one's actually got a Bush badge on it. Now, weirdly, the connectors to connect them together again are like TV coaxes, the things you plug in the area on the back of a TV. I only had a short lead, but I put them side by side. You've I unplug the wire from here, plug it into the socket in the back, and I've taken the other one from the left channel output and connected it onto there. So I've got them both on. Let's turn the record on and see what it sounds like, and I'll turn the channels left and right, up and down. So let's put another record on. Another oldie from my collection. Well, it's been 50 years since I had that when I was a teenager at my parents living at home, and these records as well, and I never thought in 50 years time I'd still be playing a record on it. This one in fact is my one, and the cartridge in it is broken or something, the needle's hanging out, and it needs a turntable mat because the other one totally atrophied. But so I can't really play a record on there and swap it, but I'm sure they sound the same. So was it worthwhile? Yeah, I think so. It's amazing really that things are still around after all that time.